In this interview series, Sasha and I are investigating a meeting of the Vaccines and Related Biological Product Advisory Committee. That's a mouthful. VRBPAC, and a very ugly acronym. This meeting took place in October of 2020. It's almost 6 years ago. And it took place 2 months before the Pfizer and the Moderna shots got the Emergency Use Authorization. That was in December 2020. So, happened shortly before. Why devote an entire series to this particular meeting, you might ask? It was a long meeting, first of all. It lasted an entire day. But that's not important. We are doing that because it was a pivotal meeting. It was a revealing meeting. It was an incriminatory meeting in case some of these guys are ever going to be prosecuted for COVID crimes, in case they are ever going to be held accountable. The purpose of that meeting was to prime and prepare the members, the voting members of this advisory committee for the coming emergency use authorization of the COVID injections. It was really important to set the narrative in the right way, make sure the members the voting members would be able to serve as messengers to the outside world, telling people that the EUA was nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. And, of course, to make sure that a large majority of these voting members would eventually end up voting for the EUA approval of the Moderna and the Pfizer shots. Mm-hmm. They did, by the way. 2 months later, the committee voted, I think that was December 10th, the committee voted 17-4 with 1 abstention on accepting the Pfizer shot. And then they voted 20-0 with 1 abstention on the Moderna shot a week later on December 17, 2020. And when we discuss this particular presentation we're going to talk about today, I think there might be a clue in there why it is that the Moderna shot got the 20-0 and the Pfizer shot got the 17-4. Mm-hmm. So there were 4 people who voted against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another for context setting. So the Vaccines and Advisory. Vaccines and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. These are the committees. The way the FDA works is FDA can approve products. They technically don't need external advisors to approve products, but for decades, FDA has run this practice where they invite doctors, key opinion leaders, academics in a particular disease area when a new drug or device is being approved in that area. And the purpose of so there are for specific therapeutic areas, they have memberships of these committees, which are updated from time to time, but usually they involve some high prestigious doctors and academics in the area. And the role of the committee is to review clinical trial data, so pivotal clinical trial data, phase 3, several phase 3 studies, safety data, efficacy data. So typically these committee meetings are designed to discuss the data, gain medical community acceptance of this new product, have on-record discussion and debate, and then vote for the approval. As I said, it's not required that the FDA invites these people, but they typically do because they want the industry, the community, the medical practice to accept these new products. And so it's very, very strange that this whole meeting took place several months before any data was available to review. So December 10 was when the first time Pfizer data became available, Pfizer phase 3 preliminary data, which they hastily assembled from 160 cases that they were able to detect in their clinical trials. But prior to that, nobody has seen any data. And so it's very strange that in October of 2020, October 22, 2020, before any data is available, they've called this committee discussing nothing about the product, but just making these statements that we're discussing and reviewing. And it's extremely strange, the whole purpose of it, other than propaganda.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And you know what's really interesting? In this presentation that we are going to look at by Dr. Hilary Marston, mm-hmm. She belonged to the NIH back then. In her presentation, she talks about data from phase 1, from the clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2, and says that these data show, overall how great this vaccine is, how effective it is, and how well people tolerate it, and no serious side effects, everything wonderful. But she doesn't share any data.
Yeah. Because that's another very, very strange thing. So the only little bit of data was from phase 1. There wasn't actually phase 2. There was only phase 1. And then they went into phase 2, phase 3 was the first briefing document became available on December 10th. So phase 1 was tiny studies. And maybe they had some animal data at that time, I believe, although not complete at all. So at least, that data was available, and they could have shown it to the key opinion leaders, to the members of the committee, but they didn't. They just hand waved, right? And so the rest of the meeting is just hand waving and not discussing any data.
Yes. And what I forgot to mention also is that this VRBPAC belongs to the FDA. And you already said these recommendations, it recommends, it doesn't have any, it cannot force anything, but it recommends, and these recommendations are usually followed, which is not surprising, because these voting members, they belong to the universe of these HHS federal agencies. They're not kind of their opponents or their enemies. No, not at all. And there's a very wide and well-oiled rotating door between these federal agencies and academia, pharmaceutical companies, and, medical corporations and medicine.
Right. And they're also, all these key opinion leaders are highly, highly dependent on NIH funding for their existence. So they will always vote with whatever NIH says to vote for.
I know. You don't bite the hand that feeds
they're
you.
very
right?
smart in that regard. They don't bite the hand that feeds you.
And then this VRBPAC. I hope it's going to become as well known as ACIP. ACIP, nobody knew about ACIP, a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And now everybody knows about ACIP, or at least many, many people know about ACIP. Nobody knows it, or very few people know about VRBPAC, but it's just as important, if not more important, than this ACIP
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
They're complementary, but they're complementary but distinct. So the VRBPAC comes first. It advises the FDA on approving vaccines. And then the ACIP advises the CDC and how to when this approved vaccine should be recommended for use. All right. So this meeting, I already said, it was very long. It was virtual. It was during the height of the pandemic, so everything was virtual, and it was open to the public. And there were some public people, not the authentic public, because the authentic public has no clue that this committee exists and that they were having a meeting. There was not a single member of the authentic public. Too bad. Would have been fascinating. Wouldn't you have loved to have known that, Sasha?
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I didn't really know to follow these committees or anything, but I did review the December 10th publication immediately as it became available, the data, and I was horrified. Right. And that's when I started really seriously even investigating this. But before, in October 2020, I was still not really, paying that much attention to everything.
Yep. If you had gone to this meeting, that would have given you a head start of several years.
Probably. But also, as we discussed in a previous episode of this series, I actually didn't, in retrospect now, there's so many lies visible in these presentations. But at the time, because I didn't know about the military nature of the campaign, I didn't know about EUA countermeasures or PrEP, I would have missed, I would have been just as deluded as they intended to delude all the professionals. Because the committee members also not aware of these relevant laws, and so. But now, with all the research that I've done, reviewing these materials is incredible. There's so many lies. There's intent written all over these presentations.
Yeah, maybe you're right, and that's a pretty scary thought. And maybe you're right. Okay, so let's for those who haven't watched the first part of the series, I just want to quickly show who the voting members of this committee are and how they are outnumbered by those who don't vote. And these are the people who belong to the federal agencies. There are, in fact, only 15 voting members. And then there are, but there are way more people. There are like 40 people or so, official, and they are from the FDA, NIH, BARDA, CDC, and other agencies. And they are the ones that talk. They are the ones who are in control of the meeting. There is some chair or co-chair who is a voting member, so who doesn't belong to these federal agencies, but that's just like a decorative role. He doesn't have any power. This person that was chairing this particular meeting doesn't have any power. The meeting is completely controlled by the officials, and the voting members, they are just kind of sitting there and taking everything in, listening, or maybe falling asleep dozing off behind their because the cameras were all off, the mics were all off. And it was a very long meeting and tons of information to take in. So it very dense, very, very, very difficult to follow, really, and very fast paced. My God, what they did there in these what hours, 6-8 hours, amazing. So they were just passive. They were allowed once in a while to squeeze in a question, but it was always, we are running late. We don't have time for questions. Let's move on to the next very complex and very long presentation. So they don't really play any role.
No. Yeah. They're just the rubber stamp sitting there behind the turned off cameras and screens. And just to check the box, we've discussed it with all the prestigious, thought leaders in this space and all the smartest in academia and medicine. That was just the only objective of this. But the people behind the screens were just snowed with, this fire hose of extremely dense and complicated legal frameworks that nobody understands.
And there was I found one really good question asked by one of the voting members. And we are not going to cover this in this part, but in another part.
All right.
And that question was parked. It was handed off. The person who was asked said, I'm going to hand that off to someone else. And then the person that was handed off to said, let's park this until this afternoon. Okay. So let's have a quick look at the members themselves. Let's go to the beginning of it. Oh yeah, here we are. So so this is the transcript. It's a 400-page transcript. Open session, October 22nd, 2020, and it starts off with the table of the attendees. I color-coded it so you can see everything that is orange is officials from health agencies. So here on this first page, you see the yellow is medical schools. So in yellow, you see the universities, the medical schools, the hospitals. Hospitals I did in green. Everything that is in orange is the HHS, any federal health agencies. The only here blue, there's one blue that is Merck, pharmaceutical industry. Now I'm scrolling down to the second page, and this is all orange. See, there's BARDA, NIAID, NIH, and then, of course, lots of people from the FDA. See this whole row here of people from the FDA. So the voting members are in the minority, actually. When we did our first interview, we had a look at the very first presentation. And that presentation was given by Dr. Marion Gruber. She's a very high official at the FDA. And as you pointed out during our last interview, and I actually want to go a little bit more into that because she's a very interesting and important person in this whole game. Marion Gruber. And I was thinking, oh my God, her name sounds so German. And in the meantime, I found out, I wondered, did she grow up in Germany or does she just have a German name? She actually did grow up in Germany and she studied in Germany. She did her PhD in Germany. I want to have a closer look at her. It's very interesting. And Marion Gruber, she spoke about BLA and EUA approval. And most of the people, these non-voting members, probably didn't know anything about EUA, Emergency Use Authorization, had no clue what it meant legally, what it meant practically. And so she talked about EUA, and she really hid the true meaning of what an EUA is completely.
Yes.
She talked about, there's no informed consent and blah, blah, blah. But all in all, not much difference, and it's safe, nothing to worry about.
Yeah, she also what points to intentionality in her presentation. Even though she's lauded as a hero who resigned from FDA because Peter Marks was pushing, she was in charge of safety, and Peter Marks was pushing for extremely rapid review, and she was pushing back, and ultimately she resigned. And so that was presented as an act of defiance, sort of, good from the health freedom perspective. Maybe. However, in this presentation, we've identified her, what seems like an intentional effort to deceive the committee members and the public by extension, when she quotes the relevant EUA countermeasures law and deliberately inserts investigational into a few places where it's not, because EUA countermeasures are legally deemed non-investigational. Yet in her presentation, the language of the law is quoted with the words that are not in it, even highlighted and bolded. So she calls EUA countermeasures investigational, and that's a lie. So that was very, very important to identify in her presentation.
Yes, exactly. And they all call it investigational, all these speakers do. By the way, she resigned almost a year after this meeting. So it wasn't like immediately or anything. It had something apparently to do with the boosters. There was some disagreement about that. But let's have a look at her, because she is so important. Here is her LinkedIn, Marion Gruber. She must be in her late 60s, about that age. And I click on About. So she says, dedicated to making vaccines available to advance global public health. So she has over 25 years professional experience and training in the regulation and development of vaccines and related biological products. And then she says here, led the review and approval of the first ever US licensed COVID-19 vaccine, the authorization of 3 vaccines against COVID-19 under Emergency Use Authorization. So she can't be too ashamed of that, right? Having it right here in her About. And the approval of the first ever US licensed Ebola vaccine. All right. And then notable achievements.
So she calls herself an expert in vaccine regulation. Yet in her presentation on October 22nd, she clearly misrepresented the relevant US law.
Yes.
So she should be questioned about this.
Yes, she absolutely should be. She also mentions she is an expert advisor to the World Health Organization on a number of global vaccine initiatives. Then all highly effective at building collaborative partnerships with national and international key stakeholders to advise and support vaccine development globally. So like with CEPI or, all these various groups and organizations. So she is not like a hands-on scientist. She is a manager or a leader, bringing these groups together, managing the vaccine, managing these teams and the development of the vaccines. Provided leadership. So she is a leader. And now look at this down here. This is interesting. FDA Innovator Award in 2021 for an unswerving commitment to facilitating development and ensuring the quality, safety, and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, deploying during the pandemic under Emergency Use Authorization.
Yeah. So she
won the prize. She
received an award for something she presumably resigned because of.
Yeah, I bet. Doesn't look like it, right?
No.
So, and then let's have a look at her experience. I found that quite interesting. So she studied at Ulm University, which is about an hour to the north of Munich. So in Germany, she got her master's degree in biology. That was 1977 to 1982. And then she went to Kiel, which is in the very north of Germany. It's on the Baltic Sea. That's an hour to the north of Hamburg. And there she did her PhD in microbiology and immunology. from 1982 to 1986. So she did her entire education in Germany. And then she did a postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Immunology at the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation. So that's when she came for that fellowship. She came to the United States. She did that for 3 years, and then she stayed and she never went back. After this fellowship, she got a job at the FDA, and she stayed there almost her entire career. She worked for the Center of Biologics Evaluation, so the CBER, the institute that we are actually talking about. And she is within the CBER, which belongs to the FDA. She is in this Office of Vaccines Research and Review, OVRR. You get an idea how bureaucratic this and how monstrous and how big this whole apparatus is, right?
Yeah.
Just by looking at these, what is inside which agency and how many levels there are. So she did that for 13 years, and about 13 years. Then she became Associate Director for Regulatory Policy, staying in the same Office of Vaccine Research and Review. Then she became the Deputy Director of the entire office. She's really rising up through the ranks. And then she became, here, from October 2011 until October 2021, she was the Director of the Office of Vaccines Research and Review. A very high position.
Yeah.
And she goes into detail here what she did during that time. And then she resigned. She resigned in October 2021. So she resigned a full year after the meeting. And then she did something interesting. So then she left the federal health agencies. For the first time in her career, she went to something kind of outside, not really outside. It's called IAVI. I'd never heard of it before, this IAVI thing. What is IAVI? It's a global non-profit biomedical research organization that develops vaccines and antibodies for HIV. HIV, footprints of Fauci, tuberculosis and emergent infectious diseases. And then it says, see all these happy pictures here. They have these labs all over the world, Africa, India, Europe. I want to go to the funding. Where is the funding? Funders. Let's go here. Yeah. The work IIV does would not be possible. Indeed, it's a nonprofit after all. It's a nonprofit without the generous funders, individuals, and partners around the world who have supported our mission since our founding in 1996. So it's three decades. Almost half of the funding comes from governments, and then almost another half comes from these, nonprofits like the Gates Foundation. So the Gates Foundation features prominently here: government of Denmark, European Union, government of India, government of Germany. Well, she must have good relationships because of her background. Yeah, she probably has very good relationships.
This is, practically some kind of a subdivision of WHO, United Nations. I mean, they are, all of these governments are paying them money. Oh, USAID, look at that.
Yeah, USAID.
PEPFAR. Oh, okay.
What is that? What is PEPFAR?
That's also funding for, pandemic funding, pandemic money spigots from the U.S. government. USAID is more like a CIA kind of funding, slush funds for these activities.
The USAID is no longer in existence or was folded into the State Department. Sure, the activities are still ongoing, but it's no longer in the Research Council of Norway. And then with thanks to other generous funders.
Defense Threat Reduction Agency, Department of Defense, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, BARDA, the World Bank, Wellcome Trust, of course, Hearst Foundation, Merck, yes, who would doubt that? Government of the United Kingdom. Yeah,
you have them all. Okay, so this is where she ended up.
I think she got a promotion, actually.
Yeah, she probably earns more money there, I would think.
She seems to be in charge of. She seems to be now higher ranking international body that is linked to the pandemic preparedness mafia through Gates and everything else.
Right. So that was Marion Gruber, and that was the first presentation during this VRBPAC meeting.
Mm-hmm.
She had a very, very short slideshow, and it was just text. But this next presentation is very different. It's a 34-page slideshow that is very, very interesting. So let's go to the next one. Dr. Hilary Marston. Let's first look at who she actually is. I had a hard time finding her on LinkedIn. I thought, oh, she's not on LinkedIn. But then I found her through the company where she works now, which is called Canal Row Advisors.
Mm-hmm.
Here she is. So she did, let's go to her education first. She got an MD in internal medicine from the University of Pennsylvania from 2005 to 2009. And then on top of that, she did a master's, an MPH, a master's in public health from Harvard School of Public Health, 2011 to 2013. She never, as far as I can make out here, she never worked as a doctor. I might be wrong about that, but I don't see anything here that suggests that she actually worked as a doctor.
Yeah, typically somebody who gets master's in public health, they're going into administration. They're not going into medical practice.
Yes. Yeah. So from 2000 to 2002, she worked as a business analyst at McKinsey. And then from 2002 to May 2005, she worked as a special program officer and special assistant to the president at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was special assistant to the president. So the president of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I guess, is Bill Gates, or not? Or is it somebody else? Maybe it's somebody else.
Yeah, we need to look at it.
Yeah, I didn't look at that. But anyway, she had she seems to have had quite a high position there. Then look at this. This is so interesting. She was a global health equity resident at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. It's a famous hospital. What's a global health equity resident doing that?
The Sustainable Development Goals supervisor, Agenda 2030 implementer.
Yeah,
it's all those activities. The globalist, and when they say equity is basically driving racial division in the society through health initiatives, that's what they're doing.
And then the way she describes it is, she says, resident in joint internal medicine and global health residency. That's a weird sentence. Yeah. Oversaw clinical care on oncology, cardiology, and general medicine wards of Brigham and Women's Hospital. So that means she was an overseeing administrator. She was making sure that these doctors were following the protocols. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, not just protocols, but the protocols are also implemented toward the same, Agenda 2030, One Health, global, pandemic surveillance, equity, all these word salads that they push, all these 17 sustainable, how many they have, sustainable development goals, whichever ones of them deal with health. Well, her job was to make sure that everything aligns with these new world orders from the globalist organizations, and more importantly, from the owners of who are hiding behind those globalist organizations.
Right. And then, so after those 4 years, she went to the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, Fauci's shop. That's where Fauci is sitting.
Yep.
So she joined Fauci's shop in 2013 and stayed there for 9 years. And she was actually, I read somewhere else, she was mentored by Fauci.
Oh, no.
So she was, at first she was a senior policy fellow for global health, and then she was a medical officer and policy advisor. I mean, you wonder how much these people still retain from their medical school, right? I mean,
the medical school diploma was there just to basically it's a credentialism that you need to. She's never practiced medicine, and they don't plan to practice medicine. None of what she's doing is about practice of medicine at all. As I said, it's all about the globalist objectives, subverting public health for purposes of extracting wealth and controlling the population for the globalists. And not surprisingly, her position is called Policy Fellow for Global Health. She's rotating through Bill Gates controlled organizations, basically, including the NIAID.
Yes. So next, she's the Director of Medical and Biodefense Preparedness at the National Security Council in the White House full time. And that was from January 2021 to August 2022. So when she was giving the presentation at the VRBPAC, she was still here at the NIAID, which belongs to the NIH, which is under the NIH. But it was towards the end of her time there. So a couple of months later, in January, so just 3 months later, she became the Director of Medical and Biodefense Preparedness at the National Security Council.
Yeah. And so a very, very important position, because National Security Council is the body that drove all pandemic policy. It wasn't Fauci. So actually this morning I was responding to requests for comments on various journalists are writing about current hearings and Rand Paul, saying that they're going to prosecute Fauci somehow, which I don't believe they will. But even if they do, the important part is Fauci was never in charge of COVID policy. It wasn't his job. Actually, Hilary had a higher position as of January 2021. She had higher position on the policy decision-making than Fauci. Fauci continues being a mouthpiece, while Hilary here is sitting right at the table where decisions are being made, and Fauci is not part of those decisions. National Security Council is an advisory body to U.S. president. They advise them on items of war, foreign policy, terrorism, national security, but health representatives are not there. So she's now left health. She's now in the deep state and in the military intelligence apparatus.
Yes, and I would argue she really was kind of, at least with half her legs before as well, and all these things that she did. Right. And I saw that Matt Hepburn, he also was at some point the Director of Medical and Biodefense Preparedness.
I think he was there. So he was there during 2020, and seems like she's there now at 21.
Let's see if we can find him. Is that Matt? Yes, that's Matthew Hepburn. He's the guy who called around in 2017 telling pharmaceutical companies they should develop vaccines in 60 days, right?
Yes. So he was the one who claims that he came up with the pandemic preparedness concept to begin with. So he claims to be the mastermind of this. He gives TED Talks, linked there, on this matter. And then he was a key program manager in DARPA, structuring this consortium as early as 2012. And then AstraZeneca, I have a tape where AstraZeneca CEO discusses that Hepburn and DARPA approached them to be part of this consortium. And on February 4th, they received a phone call. February 4th, 2020, they received a phone call from DARPA declaring that COVID was declared a national security threat. So that came from DARPA, from members of the National Security Council. Again, the phone call didn't come from Fauci. Fauci didn't pull the trigger. He was the mouthpiece, communicator to the public, fearmonger, propagandist in charge. But the decisions were made by these people, like Matthew Hepburn, like Hilary Marston, and anyone else. Kash Patel was on National Security Council in 2020. So those people need to be questioned. And sure, Fauci should be prosecuted, of course. But those are the people that the Rand Paul needs to start bringing to Congress, but he doesn't seem to be interested in that angle at all.
So here you see Matthew Hepburn as Director of Medical Preparedness, National Security Council, the White House, and that was from December 2010 to June 2013. All right, let's go back to Hilary. So after that, in May 2021, she becomes the Senior Policy Advisor for Global COVID Response. And she does that for a year and 4 months. Now, I don't understand this, but see this icon here?
Trump?
The White House, but it's Trump. I mean, she was there under Biden, so maybe it might be that, I guess what they do is they just change the icon, and it's kind of weird to see his face here. Okay, but she was under Biden, so wasn't under Trump. And then from there, so senior policy advisor for global COVID response, the White House. And then in July 2022, she became the chief medical officer of the FDA. That must be one of the highest positions in the FDA, correct?
Chief medical officer of the FDA. Yes, it's a high position. I'm not totally certain where it sits relative. I think it's very senior, of course, at the FDA.
So she did that for 3 years, and then she left and went to Canal Row Advisors. So let's have a look at this Canal Row Advisors, because now she's at like some sort of private company.
Yeah, it's probably some sort of a lobbying firm, high-profile lobbying firm, if I had to guess.
Here she is. This is also, so they write about her here, and she. So that this is how they portray her. They say Hilary Marston, MD, MPH, served for more than a decade as a leader and strategic advisor on national public health policy and is a recognized expert in the clinical and regulatory aspects of medical product and vaccine development. She brings this expertise to her work with biotechnology and drug companies, and of course all her connections she brings as well, and investors at Canal Row. Canal Row. And prior to this, at Marston Health LLC, which she founded after her tenure in FDA leadership. Oh, she founded this Marston Health LLC. Okay. And then they talk about her here.
Yeah, this seems to be an investment, some sort of an investment fund that uses connections of these high-profile executives from the FDA.
Yeah, so this is about us. They're here in the toughest rooms. Our focus never falters.
Okay.
Every word, every chart, every point of analysis built to withstand scrutiny. Okay, so what do they actually do? Canal Row has multidisciplinary expertise to support drug and biologic sponsors across a range of therapeutic areas, patient populations, product types, and technologies.
Yeah, so it seems that these people are basically capitalizing on their previous FDA connections to sell services to pharma companies and medical device companies to, basically help them get the products shoved on the market and avoid regulations as far as I can tell, because this is what typically these people set up shops to do.
Yes, I think you're exactly right. Look, it says here with first-hand insight into the FDA's decision-making precedents and expectations. Yeah, no wonder, because they're all coming from the FDA, or at least some of them. We anticipate complexity, address challenges, and shape strategies to advance your product.
Yeah.
So like the FDA's product.
Yeah, regulatory and investment consultants.
Yes, right. Through approval and post-market. And then they have here the advisory committee meetings.
Right.
Wow. When an NDA or BLA is facing an FDA advisory committee, like this one here, right? The VRBPAC, we prepare sponsors with strategies for a successful outcome.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So the FDA is not capable of doing that itself. It needs these probably very expensive advisors.
I mean, there are of course regulatory consultants and investment consultants and all that. It's normal in the industry, and a lot of pharma companies are nowadays virtual or very small, so they do need to hire consultants to do these tasks. But the point is, obviously she's selling her connections, and that she can call up, a current as head of CBER or CEDAR, except now FDA doesn't have any. So I wonder what Hilary is going to do next. But this is her basically. She left the agency as usual, and now she's working for the private sector.
And probably very well paid.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I would think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here, Biodefense, Pandemic Preparedness, we assist sponsors. Mm-hmm. So who are these sponsors?
Pharma companies. When they say sponsors, it's a pharma company or medical device company.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And navigating the specialized regulatory requirements. Mm-hmm. God, the whole thing is so corrupt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically we help you navigate this really great corruption here that only we understand and nobody else does. So if you pay us enough, then we'll push you through this, priority lane over here.
Gosh, yeah. And it's not even really necessary because they're all on the same side anyway. But, they can, it gives them an opportunity to make a lot of money.
Well,
so, why not?
They're all on the same side. But think about it. There were 300 companies in the Pandemic Preparedness Consortium. 26 ostensibly started Operation Warp Speed. And we arrived at 2.5, and quickly it was, whittled down to 2, Pfizer and Moderna. So if you are like Hilary and you know which horses to bet on, this advisory fund and for investors or for corporates is the right choice for you.
Right. And you can also make money with the other 298 or whatever that didn't make it because, why not? Why not make some money, even if you know that there's hardly any chance that that's going to go anywhere? Oh, okay. So that is Hilary. So now we have an idea who she is. Let's go to her presentation. So it says COVID-19 vaccine development, the role of the NIH. Hilary D. Marston, MD, MPH, October 22nd, 2020. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to jump in my transcript to the part where she starts speaking about these 34 slides that she has. And she must have taken a long time to prepare these slides, or somebody prepared them, whoever it was. And I'm glad she did, because there's a lot of very interesting information. And more than she had maybe, I don't know, maybe she spoke for 15 minutes or so. But there's way more information on these slides than what she's saying. All right, so she says, and it's all in this Zoom meeting or whatever they use. It's this virtual meeting. So now the participants see her slides on their laptops or their computers, and they hear Dr. Marston speaking. And she says, "Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you today about the role that the NIH plays in COVID-19 vaccine development. So my name is Hilary Marston. I'm a medical officer and policy advisor for pandemic preparedness in the office of the director at NIAID." So now she says what she wants to speak about. I'd like to speak today about 3 different aspects of our work in COVID-19 vaccine development. First, moving from preparedness to response. Second, our work in phase 3 trials and our efforts to create harmonized clinical trials. And third, within those trials, our key priorities and some future directions. So the first part of her presentation is moving from preparedness to response. Okay, so let's see. And she starts off with this slide here. And she says, first, basic research moving from pandemic preparedness to response. And you see this article here that appeared in Science, January 11, 2020. Chinese researchers reveal draft genome of virus implicated in Wuhan pneumonia outbreak by John Cohen. So she says, when cases of this new pneumonia syndrome first came to light in the beginning of January 2020, and when researchers shared the genetic sequence of this new virus on international databases on January 10th, and it was reported 1 day later, we had researchers who were ready to jump into vaccine development. And then she says the reason why they were so primed to this work is because the NIH had made a long-term investment in pandemic preparedness, response research, and preparedness research. So specifically, these researchers had worked on this family of beta coronaviruses. Here you see them on this slide. And this was back in, so this is 2017. We knew from both SARS and MERS that this family had the potential to cause epidemics. I don't read everything, it's too much, but she says later on, a little bit later, just a few paragraphs later, what they did back then. So we take the protein that's on the outside of the virus, we stabilize it in the genetic sequence by making 2 specific mutations and use that as the vaccine antigen. And then she said, animal studies on MERS show that this approach made the protein far more immunogenic in mice. So gave more immunity to mice. But Sasha, wasn't these animal experiments, didn't almost all these animals die?
Well, so I don't know which particular that graph below, that I don't know where it coming from. She's not sourcing it to anything. Or maybe it's from this paper that she's quoting here.
Yeah.
So I don't know what type of study that was. Now, first of all, these images above, they're computer generated so-called folded protein image. It's purely a mathematical model. It's not real. Okay, so it does not exist in nature like this. That's why she was saying draft genome, because it's a product of computer modeling with PCR. And typically, so they revealed draft genome. So first of all, it's a draft because none of the PCR sequenced structures like she's showing above, these spike proteins or viruses or whatever they call them, they're too large to be fully sequenced, and because PCR sequencing generates errors somewhere between I guess 1 per 10,000 bases or something like that. That's in the best case. And PCR itself is never reproducible. They also never use controls. So it's not reproducible. You cannot ever accurately sequence any of these kinds of structures. And this is not me saying, it's Ralph Baric saying in his papers and in his reports to the defense and NIH and so forth. So he himself confirmed that you can never accurately sequence any so-called pathogen, whether you believe in them or not. And that's why they're always saying it's a draft. They do numerous, attempts at sequencing various samples, and then they do what's called consensus genome, where they average a whole bunch of non-reproducible outcomes, and then they use them to construct these kinds of models. But all of this is a model, and then they produce some sort of either they naturally derive and grow some sample of something, or they produce it synthetically, then give it to mice, and then measure the antibody titers. And that's it. And then again, it's a measurement. Antibody titer is not immunity. There's numerous extensive scientific literature saying that antibodies do not equal immunity. People who are not susceptible to particular diseases oftentimes don't have any antibodies. And oftentimes high antibody titers do not correlate to any protection, and the people get sick from the same illness. So this whole antibody science is not science. It's again, it's part of the computer modeling that she's showing here. So all of this is basically fluff. She's producing fluff. Again, she doesn't understand medicine. She's never practiced it. All she knows is these pointless, I would say, models, and then making claims, non-scientific claims of immunity based on some sort of a production of a titer in the mouse.
Yes, I mean, as we have seen by going over her CV, she's like a manager. She's a high level.
She's an administrator.
Manager.
She's a global One Health young global leader. Bill Gates protege, Fauci protege, but she understands nothing about immunity or medicine or how to prevent illness or anything like that.
So let's go to the next page. So there is another article here that she references, and she says, when she comes to this page, the researchers are listed here Kismakia Corbett and Barney Graham. Here they are. And she says about them, they were able to make those changes that they wanted to make, that stabilized antigen, share it with our industry partners at Moderna. We had a pre-existing research collaboration with them, and the Moderna researchers were able to put it into their rapid manufacturing platform. And 65 days later, we were able to start a phase 1 trial. 65 days later, they are 5 days over, I guess, but wasn't Matthew Hepburn talking about doing it in 60 days back in 2017?
Yes. Yeah.
So
and to which AstraZeneca senior vice president said that I thought it was science fiction. Well, that's correct.
Exactly.
Because it is science fiction, as I told you, and the professionals also recognize this. But they recognize that it's science fiction, yet they, of course, love money from the government. And once billions start flowing to the pharmaceutical company, well, they quickly forget what they said, in passing when they heard this thing about 60 days.
That's right. Well, it's well-paid science fiction. What's not to love?
It's very well-paid science fiction. Yes.
Also interesting is this rapid manufacturing. She keeps talking about that. She mentioned, so we were not the only ones, she says, who jumped into action in developing vaccines. So somebody else is going to talk about that, but she just mentions that. And then let's go to the next slide here. And then she says, so here you see the COVID-19 vaccines in Operation Warp Speed Development. And she has the mRNA branch up here. Rapid manufacturing, facilitating efficient move to clinic, highly immunogenic. And the same for this one here, the AstraZeneca and the Johnson is also rapid manufacturing, facilitating efficient move to clinic. All right, and she says, so there are 2 in the mRNA category, Moderna and BioNTech, so Pfizer. The advantage of the mRNA platform, she says, is that it offers very rapid manufacturing, which facilitates a quick move into the clinic, and they are highly immunogenic. So this emphasis on speed, rapidity. So I mentioned, she says, that we were able to launch into a phase 1 trial. Here we go. That's on the next page. Initial COVID phase 1 trials launched in March 2020.
Yeah.
Right, March 2020. Other candidates moved in quite quickly as well. And she continues, the phase 1 and 2 trials. That's what I mentioned before. The phase 1 and 2 trials have overall shown that the vaccines are quite safe, safe. So she doesn't say that. Interesting, right? They are quite safe. Immunogenic, so they provide immunity, and well tolerated.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's what she says. Okay, so to date, COVID vaccines are immunogenic, says here on the slide, and well tolerated overall. And but that was the first part.
But that's where she's not showing any data, right? So she just
no data. No.
She just says everything is great.
No data.
Trust me.
Right. It's no data. And nobody asks to
ask
and
by
about
the way,
the data.
So they started phase 1 trials, which means in people, in humans, in March 2020. Animal studies were not done until July or August. So they went directly experimenting on humans without any toxicology package, really. And even when they produced that toxicology package, I reviewed both of them, Pfizer and Moderna, in great detail. They're full of fraud. They're completely fraudulent. We actually used a lot of that material with the Children's Health Defense. I co-authored Citizens Petition to the FDA to relabel these products back to the EUA because they don't satisfy BLA standards. And that's one of the major categories on which they never satisfied biologics licensing approval standards on the toxicology package. So she's talking about it fully knowing that there is no toxicology package. Whatever is in it is going to be full of fraud. It's not even going to be compiled until several months later. Yet they're already directly experimenting on humans, on unsuspecting humans, with these EUA countermeasures, which are not even pharmaceutical products. They're de facto poisons and weapons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So that was the first part, moving from preparedness to response, which makes completely clear that the house had been built, the exterior of the house, the interior of the house, everything was in place. Now, just come in and start cooking and
now we're gonna
get it
flip
ready.
it. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
and in 60 days the soup is ready.
Yeah.
So then the second part of her presentation is evaluating safety and efficacy. Okay, that's very interesting. Harmonized, no, it's not a slash, it's a dash harmonized clinical trials. So let's start at this. And again, she starts with this article from Science. It's interesting how she pulls up so many references to these revered, not so revered anymore, but that was 6 years ago. Those were very, very revered magazines back then, scientific magazines. So here's Science. And it says here, I read this from the slide, the full development pathway for an effective vaccine for SARS-CoV-2 will require that industry, government, and academia collaborate in unprecedented ways. Unprecedented ways, each adding their individual strengths. So it's like this whole of society approach.
Yeah, mafia code.
Everyone coming together
into the profits from the organized crime cartel, and so they defend each other and protect each other.
So she says here, while she shows the slide, she says, so with those data, which data? We haven't seen any data. She just said that, with those data from phase 1 and 2 done on 100 or 200 people or something like that. So with those data, with that human experience, we were confident that we were ready to move into larger scale trials. She doesn't say anything about animal trials or anything, of course.
Yeah,
right?
Which data? They haven't done anything. She just said, trust me, we have data. Now she says, with this data, we're ready to move.
I know. She says the data is so good that I don't want to show it to you.
Exactly.
Okay. And then, so we were ready to move into larger scale trials, but we wanted to make sure that we had harmonized those clinical trials. So what is this about, this harmonizing trials?
That's a very key word that she says, because so remember they had something like 26 originally companies in this whole Operation Warp Speed, they were all it was just a pretend competitive effort, but of course it was already decided who are going to be the winners, and of course Bill Gates very, very intelligently invested in both of them, and the word harmonization is to make sure that the government, meaning the NIH and other biodefense agencies, control the clinical trial program. So I commented on it. It was also in that slide deck, but I think it's a different person's presentation. Maybe we'll cover it later. But I extensively commented on it, that this effort of designing clinical trials, pharmaceutical companies, typically each company wants to have independent control over design of the clinical trial, the protocol, relationship with the IRB, and independent safety monitoring board. So they want to have it under control. Also, that information is highly sensitive. It's the insider trading information. And so it's very, very internally safeguarded, regulated. You can be in big trouble with FTC if there is some insider trading based on this information. So that's why, for a variety of reasons, pharma companies want to have their own control over each one of their clinical trial program. And so if this was a real, truly, just arm's length relationship between government and, government providing some guidance and then pharma companies doing their programs in contract with government, then there would be no harmonization, actually. They would all have their separate efforts to design and monitor the clinical trial programs. Yet here she says, no, we're going to centralize it all, control it by the government. And there was also, through my materials, the contracts that I reviewed, there was enormous control of the government and military over all of this. And she wants to ensure that clinical trials are all, identically designed, identically monitored, so that nobody can ask the question about safety, for example, or design some sort of a safety protocol assessment that would ask questions that would trigger things that she doesn't want you to know about. So that's why it was very, very important for the US government and NIH to control this program tightly. And they call it harmonization. But it's not harmonization. It's the mafia code again. It's again, you have to have oversight and control of everything. Otherwise, there's always risk that somebody will pull a thread and it will unravel the sweater.
Right. They're so good at marketing or framing it or building the narrative. I wonder whether it's these guys at Canal Row or other shops that are thinking hard about what word to use, like one of these wonderful, positive, soothing words like harmonizing, harmony.
Yes, it sounds wonderful, like harmony. That's what the Chinese government also loves to use, social harmony. If we control everyone and everybody's in 15-minute prison, then we have a social harmony.
Like nobody's singing out of tune.
Yeah, you can't.
No more cacophony.
Yeah, same with censorship. If you censor social media, then you have harmonious appearance of harmony. Everybody agrees with experts.
Exactly.
Experts agree with the government, and
exactly. And the government is the conductor.
Yeah,
sure that. So so harmonized. How unusual is it to harmonize clinical trials?
It's very unusual. So I'm not, as I said, if it's a normal pharmaceutical product, a real commercial pharmaceutical product from a pharmaceutical company. And remember, all of these guys, they're competitors with each other. In fact, they're direct competitors. They have the same, almost identical technology that they're using. So especially in the competitive sense, the pharma companies hate being forced to do exactly the same program as your major competitor is doing.
Yes. So it's very unusual. Have you ever come across that before?
No. I've never seen this before. Yeah, that's
why
I've
never seen that before.
It stood out to me. That part stood out to me immediately when I started reviewing the contracts, how they were structured, how this was a requirement, and that was a big flag for me.
Interesting. So she says we wanted to make sure that we had harmonized those clinical trials. Also, there was no question about what is that even what is it? What does it mean, harmonizing clinical trials? Because that should have been a question, right? If that is something that is not done, or maybe was never done, or is exceedingly rarely done, but no question. Let's see. Let's move on. We wanted them to be individual trials that we could move as quickly as possible. So they had to be in charge of all of them, harmonizing them. But we also wanted to make sure that they were harmonized so we would be able to compare across the trials. Doesn't make much sense, that sentence. But she has to say something, right, about why they wanted to harmonize them. She can't very well say it so that we were in control of everything. So she continues, we laid out a specific strategy for these trials that was published in May 2020 by leaders at the NIH, along with the leader of one of our large clinical trials networks, the HIV Vaccine Trials Network. Fauci is greeting. The HIV Vaccine Trials Network they are using.
Yeah.
And so you have this complicated slide here with a candidate COVID.
Yeah, I don't know what
vaccines.
This means. What she means
by
this.
So she explains it here in what she says. The key characteristics of the harmonization are shown in this figure. So this is the slide she's looking at. So again, those are going to be individual trials as depicted at the top of the slide. So you have all these different platforms here, I guess. Is that what she means? But clinically, they are going to be harmonized with respect to endpoints, with respect to statistical analysis plans, for example. They will all use collaborating clinical trials networks, which I will describe in just a moment. By the way, I forgot to mention, I just remembered, I forgot to mention this. When you look up here, see the authors? There's Fauci and there's Francis Collins. Yeah. They co-wrote this strategic approach to COVID-19 vaccine research and development. There apparently is something called clinical trials networks. What is that?
So this is, I think she's talking about HIV prevention trial network. I mean, I'm not sure what specific one. Well, so she mentions a couple of HIV ones and infectious disease research consortium. So there are these, that's not unusual to have specific disease area of focus or some technology focus networks of clinical trial sites or specialists specialist contract research organizations that specialize in particular disease area, and have them sort of collaborating with FDA and NIH. So that's not unusual. I was part of a consortium that was looking into cardiac safety in drugs, not vaccines or biologics, but drugs. And that ran for several years at with FDA and industry. So this is not atypical, but the defense, of course, Department of Defense is kind of stands out here. Clearly a defense angle here.
So let's see what she says here. They will all use collaborating clinical trials networks, which I'll describe in just a moment. And she says more about that. We'll come to that. They'll all use collaborating labs. Interesting, right? So the labs are all collaborating. So
well, that's so they always say collaborating, but it's basically we pay them to collaborate.
So and then she says, so for key immunogenicity assays.
So that's another one. So if you remember, for a very long time, the CDC, although by the end of 2020, independent labs could do the PCR testing, but at the beginning, CDC tightly controlled it. So everything had to be sent to CDC for PCR tests, even though people said, well, if genome is published, then any lab can set it up. And technically, that's true. But somehow, no, everything needed to be under CDC and military control. And here, of course, she says the labs that are, the way that, she called it collaborating, but in fact, it's basically just part of the mafia network. If you are a lab licensed, for example, or specializing in this assay, meaning the PCR testing that you need to do or antibody testing that you need to do for the clinical trials or preclinical trials, then you need to be licensed. You need to have access to this whatever latest genome sequence, various materials, equipment. So even to buy the equipment and get licensing, you already have to be part of this mafia with NIH. You have to agree to everything that they say. You have to endorse everything they say. You have to follow every order, every protocol, or you risk losing your access to this very lucrative funding, very lucrative area. And so that's what she means by collaborating. So they're all in on the take, and they're all controlled through a variety of protocols.
So she says, so these immunogenicity assays, these are going to be run by NIH and NIH-supported labs. So they are run by NIH labs, at least some of them, by their own labs, and then by NIH-supported labs.
Yeah, and that's another part of harmonization. So pharma companies don't have a choice who to hire to do PCR testing, for example, antibody testing. They have to go through NIH. And NIH, and only NIH decides who is going to wave the magic wand and tell you if you're COVID positive or negative. Isn't that a critical part of the clinical trial? Of course it is. So
yes, you would think, right?
Yeah, so that's why all of it is tightly under government control, because government is going to ingest all the data as a black box, wave the magic wand through their preferred and controlled providers and say, oh yeah, this is positive, this is negative. And that's how we calculate the 95% efficacy rate that then turns out to be less than 1% in reality. But, for the approvals, this is how it's easily produced through a fully government-controlled, military-controlled network of providers.
Okay, so let's go back down here. So she says, so those will be the serology that distinguish SARS-CoV-2 infection from a vaccination. the neutralization assays, and the T-cell response assays. So this is all super important stuff, distinguishing the SARS-CoV-2 infection from the vaccination.
Right. And that's another very, very critical aspect, distinguishing SARS-CoV-2 infection from vaccination. So they already know that they're already telling you right in this meeting that vaccine injection causes COVID. Right? And doesn't prevent it. But we the government, are going to control that critical aspect of how to determine whether, it's a real infection or it's a vaccine damage. And so we're going to also censor that information and prevent anyone from saying, hey, guys, actually people injected with vaccines develop COVID and get hospitalized for it, such as what we have identified, myself and Craig Cooper identified through the early VAERS data and published extensively on the How Bad Is Your Batch website. We found very, very early on, basically 6 months into the rollout of the vaccines, that these vaccines were causing COVID, and the people injected with them were being hospitalized in large numbers and dying from COVID.
So, and then she talks about this data and safety monitoring board here. She says, so all these different platforms, they share a data and safety monitoring board, the DSMB. And I quote, so they share an independent data and safety monitoring board. So one data and safety monitoring board, which is comprised of long-standing vaccine experts. And they are able to look at the data in an unblinded fashion, oversee the scientific integrity of the trial, and to safeguard volunteers.
Yeah. So another very, very important part. So what she calls independent data safety monitoring board. It's a joke of a giant proportion. So the data safety monitoring board was assembled. They're supposed to be independent, again, clinicians and academics, but it was entirely NIH controlled. The head of it was, I forget his name. That's the only name that still, only has been released publicly. The rest of the members were kept secret. At the time, they were all kept secret. They're still all secret. We don't know who those independent people were. But the only person whose name is revealed, the head of this safety monitoring board, was Fauci's protege as well, just as she is Fauci's protege.
Yeah, and you know what I found amazing? During her presentation, she actually says what you just said. She said that the NIH had their own people in there, that they they picked the people to go into this independent.
How independent
data.
are they?
Yeah, but I was just, what you're telling me that the NIH was overseeing this independent board that it had put together. It's just what?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's stunning how blatant these people are. And they just keep going, and nobody stops them. Why isn't Rand Paul inviting her to testify in front of the Congress?
Yeah, I don't know. You might not know about, who knows? I don't know. So let's go. So now she talks about the clinical trials network that we had already talked about a little bit. Let's go back to this page because this is so interesting. She says the clinical, and she says that while people were looking at the slide, the clinical trials network that I mentioned, this is actually comprised of multiple clinical trials networks, which are from the NIH and the Department of Defense. So what we are seeing here on the left, this HIV vaccine trials network, this infectious diseases clinical research consortium, the HPTN, HIV, there's HIV again, HIV Prevention Trials Network, and the Department of Defense. They are making up the COVID-19 Prevention Network. All these 4 networks.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. So all these trials, including international sites, were largely controlled or maybe entirely controlled by the Department of Defense. And we know that there was a lot of fraud. There's, in my estimate, a lot of human data was just manufactured. We know that very large portion of the Pfizer trial data was magically enrolled in 1 week in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, in the military hospital. So, and the speed of the enrollment was defying imagination or anything I've seen in my career. So while I cannot prove it because we don't have any source data, we only have the productions from the FDA, I'm pretty certain, and I could bet that data was just manufactured out of thin air by the military, by the Argentinian military for the U.S. government.
And then she says, collectively from these 4 trial networks, the investigators in these networks have decades of experience in clinical trials and large-scale clinical trials for infectious diseases. So they came together recognizing the urgency of the public health emergency and created a new entity called the COVID-19 Prevention Network.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is, COVID-19 Prevention Network, and it's abbreviated CoVPN, another horrible acronym.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, a little bit, she says a little bit about the governance of these trials. So again, the vaccine companies are the IND sponsor, so the investigational new drug application sponsors. And then each trial has clinical trial sites that are provided by both contract research organizations contracted to the company. So let's say Moderna contracts out a contract research organization where the trial site actually is. It's not at Moderna itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the COVID Prevention Network, so contracted to the company, but also this COVID Prevention Network. So the way I understand it is that they wanted to have really tight control
and extract as much money as they possibly can. So this is the government paying itself, and its crony corporations and itself.
That's true.
And it's relatives that run these fake producing clinical sites for the government. So they need to take cut everywhere from every angle, and that's part of that.
And then she continues, each of the companies, each of the trials report into this independent data and safety monitoring board, which offers its recommendations to an oversight group. And the oversight group is comprised of representatives from NIH, BARDA, and shared by the company sponsor. I think that's on the next slide here. Yeah, here we go. So here's her graph. So down here, you see the contract, here the trial sites, the contract research organization, and this CoVPN thing, this trial network. And they belong to the vaccine companies, so the IND sponsor, which is the vaccine company. And then there is this monitoring board, and above it is this. But it really is all the same.
It's all the same. So all of this except the IND sponsor line, which is the individual companies like Pfizer and Moderna, all of the rest of it is government, and the money is circular. So the BARDA and DoD issues the contracts, so allocates the money, and the money goes to the clinical research organizations and their CoVPN. And so the money is circulating from, taxpayers' money is being circulated, and everybody gets a cut. And the pharma companies are just a representative layer to pretend to the public that this is a arm's length commercial companies making wonderful products, putting their trusted brand names on them and so forth.
And then she says just a little bit more detail on the NIH there. So she means up here, I guess, on this, I don't know, on the NIH there. So again, the company is the regulatory sponsor under 21 CFR 312. The phase 3 trials, the protocols were designed in collaboration with Operation Warp Speed, with the NIH, and specifically the active partnership under the NIH, that public-private partnership, the CoVPN, and they all conform to FDA standards. The trials are overseen by that Data and Safety Monitoring Board, for which NIH serves as the secretariat. The NIH, and now here comes the sentence, the NIH, along with the active partnership, offered the names for the DSMB, for the Independent Data and Safety Monitoring Board. So they offered the names, and of course they were accepted.
Yeah, of course they're accepted. So and as I said, those names are still secret. We still don't know who they are, who those independent people are, whether they exist or not.
Yeah. But if I had been listening to this, and it was all very fast, she didn't have much time. This is a really long presentation, and she went through this at great speed. I don't think people would have even understood half of it. Okay, so, and then she says, NIH sits on that oversight group. Listen to this, and it's so hilarious. She says, so we, the NIH, are at each level of the trial structure.
Yeah, we
Isn't
sit
that
at each
awesome?
level of the trial structure.
Yes,
but
she
it's
says that.
completely
at
independent.
Each level. Yes, and it's completely independent.
And harmonious.
Isn't this hilarious? Isn't that amazing? Yes, it's so harmonious, but it's independent and harmonious at the same time. They figured it out.
Yeah.
And then she says a bit on the trials themselves. Okay, yeah, well, that's interesting. We want to know a little bit. Oh, here's another the trial oversight structure, the NIH role. There's one thing that I wanted to point out. Do you see the footnote here? Down here? So here the two, here. Down here it says, trials are overseen by an independent data safety monitoring board for which NIH serves as the secretariat. It's such a Russian, the secretariat. Oh, I hate all these. Reminds me of the Soviet Union so much. Okay, but here, so down here, exception is
Pfizer. Yeah.
Pfizer is Pfizer, which is running its trial independent of the structure.
Yeah. So Pfizer is the only one who, as I said, prevailed in at least carving out the DSMB for themselves. As I said, pharma companies like to have all of it under their own control. And it's rather immaterial in hindsight, because Pfizer did everything exactly exactly the same manner, using the same providers, the same network, the same all of it, and of course we're a big part of the Operation Warp Speed now. But based on this little footnote, it's been claimed that Pfizer was not part of Operation Warp Speed. So if you recall, there was a lawsuit by Attorney General of Kansas, this pretend health freedom lawsuit, which I criticized quite openly, pretending to sue Pfizer for marketing violations in the state of Kansas. Of course, it went nowhere. And the claim that this Attorney General made was that Pfizer, because of this footnote, Pfizer wasn't part of Operation Warp Speed, which is nonsense. Pfizer, of course, is clearly part of the Operation Warp Speed. Was major part, and nobody in this meeting on October 22nd says anything of the kind. They just, said, okay, well, they run their own DSMB, but in the bigger scheme of things, it's a minor difference.
Yeah. And I mean, they have Pfizer all over the place here. Look, for example, let's go up here. Here we go. Yeah, there's Pfizer. So it's not, but so why is it that Pfizer was outside of this structure?
I think it was just Pfizer asserting its own, throwing their own corporate weight around. It's something that they've negotiated. It's, as I said, they want to maintain as much power as they can. This is as much as they could, wrangle with the government, but nothing that they did differed in any way from what the rest of their Operation Warp Speed did, and they went along with everything that NIH wanted to do and FDA wanted to do. So I don't see any difference in Pfizer having, other than Pfizer. Well, actually, the different why Pfizer and why pharma companies want to have their own DSMB is because they get access to safety data much faster. Like J&J didn't have access to their J&J and the rest of the Operation Warp Speed participants who were relying on NIH's DSMB, they didn't have access to their safety data during their own during their own clinical trials. And
that's crazy.
That became apparent when Mike Eden confronted one of the people from Masai Mamen. Actually, I know him too. He used to be my client when he was in a different company, but he was the head of vaccine for J&J during this time. And in around 2021, Mike Eden confronted him on LinkedIn and wrote him emails. Mike Eden knows him much better. and wrote him emails about the safety concerns and especially with respect to pregnancy, fertility, reproductive toxicology. And after that, J&J had to FOIA and then subsequently sue the US government to get access to their safety data. Because to me, it seems that Masai Mamen asked internal people, where's our safety data? They said, we don't have access to it. They probably asked to FOIA the US government. The US government said no. They went and sued for it. And that was when FDA suddenly found some really concerning six or seven cases in J&J and started putting warning labels on it, and subsequently found manufacturing violations, and subsequently J&J was withdrawn from market, essentially. I mean, it was sort of available, but not really available. So after that, the J&J was punished and removed from the game and from the, billions of dollars in revenue. And Masai Mamen resigned and shortly after and left J&J. So
interesting.
Leaving, actually, Mike Eden said that potentially he left millions on the table by doing so. So to me, this means that this was, this is how the pharma companies were just told, shut up, obey, put your label on it. You don't even have access to your own data during this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And by the way, during the meeting, Hilary Marston, she does not mention what it says in the footnote that Pfizer got an exception, that it's independent of the structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking maybe, I have no idea, but maybe that, I don't even know how many people that were listening understood that, because who was going to read this little footnote there while the slide was up? That was probably missed by most of them, but maybe it became clear later. Maybe that was one of the reasons why there were 4 people who voted down Pfizer, the EUA for Pfizer later on in December. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on. Okay, so she wants to talk more about the trials themselves. So here is some information about that. So she says these are all randomized, placebo-controlled efficacy trials with either a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 vaccine to placebo match. The sample size varies somewhat, but they are anywhere from 30 to 60,000 volunteers. Then she talks about the primary efficacy endpoints has a point estimate requirement of greater than 60%. Mm-hmm. The lower bound of the confidence interval must be greater than 30%. Is that usual, these endpoints?
These are, I've seen these guidelines from WHO and FDA, and but of course it's never specified whether they're talking about absolute or relative efficacy. That's a huge difference because as I said in the first Pfizer trial demonstrated in their briefing documents, they claimed that they had 95% efficacy.
Which was ridiculous.
If you look at this guideline and say, oh wow, this is wonderful, 95, while the guideline is you need to be over 60 and the lower confidence bound over 30. But that's relative efficacy, meaning when they're just looking at and as I said, that was calculated on a very, very small number of cases, PCR cases, and relative efficacy means absolutely nothing. It's a statistic. What's important so people think that if I say 95% efficacy, they think that I have 95% protection, right? Means that I only have 5% chance of getting COVID. But that's not true at all. In the absolute terms, when this is expressed in the absolute efficacy terms, the same 95% translates for Pfizer to less than 1%. So it means that you still have 99 point something percent chance of getting COVID, whatever that is, based on this clinical trial data. And again, this is part of the manipulation. These efficacy numbers are meaningless, absolutely meaningless. And they just randomly made them up at WHO, and they constantly manipulate the data. So it just means absolutely nothing. It's just designed to make you feel good, if you don't know any better.
Right, and only the absolute number really should be used, the absolute estimate, and not this other thing that is totally misleading. Okay, and then the primary endpoint is here. Look, prevention of symptomatic COVID-19 disease, PCR confirmed. Okay, so then she says the population. Yeah, she talks about the population. So these are individuals. So the trial participants are over 18 years of age. We are specifically reaching for people who are at risk. We are specifically reaching for people who are at risk of severe disease. So whether those are individuals who are elderly or have comorbidities or are from underserved minorities.
Yeah, so these trials famously, had, I think Pfizer trials was something like 40,000 people. And yes, the design was you reach out to people who are considered at increased risk of COVID. Usually they were going to enroll healthcare providers, first responders, and so forth, nurses, so they're claiming, we're going at the height of the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, March 2020, whenever they started. We're going right to the front line where it happens, where this majorly infectious and dangerous virus is circulating. We're enrolling from that population. And at the end of it, on December 10th, Pfizer submits a clinical trial data where out of 40,000 people, they could only master like 160 cases. So at the time, I saw that briefing document on December 10th, and my first commentary was, well, they have just demonstrated conclusively that COVID is nothing. It's nothing to worry about at all. It's so exceedingly rare, even at the height of the pandemic, amongst the most exposed people. Absolutely nothing to worry about. That's the only thing that trial truly demonstrated. Everything else was total garbage and manipulation of the data.
And then she also points out the Pfizer trials, they actually enrolled down to age 12. Back then already.
Already they deem age 13 as an adult, right? At that time.
So then on the next page, safety considerations. So she says here, some specifics on the safety follow-up in the trial. So very interesting. So the primary safety objective is to evaluate safety and reactogenicity of vaccines. For 7 days, we are looking at solicited local and systemic adverse reactions. 28 days, we are looking at unsolicited adverse events. And then at any time in the 2-year follow-up for medically attended adverse events of special interest as outlined in the protocol, and severe adverse events at any time.
Yeah, so she says 2-year follow-up, but we know that when the first briefing documents were submitted, so 2 months after the completion of enrollment for the phase 3 clinical trials, they unblinded the study and they injected the control group. So
exactly,
there is no possibility of doing a 2-year follow-up for safety because now all of the participants have been injected.
Yes, exactly. And during that meeting, I think I mentioned that last time, it already becomes clear that they're going to unblind it because there are questions. There are actually questions about, well, what about, isn't there a high chance that the people in the control group, if they think the vaccine is effective, they also want it, and how can you not give it to them?
And those are probably planted questions.
Oh yeah, maybe. Maybe Canal row advice, maybe to do it or some other shop. But you know what? What I also wanted to point out here. Let's go back to this footnote just really quickly. Exception is Pfizer. The meeting was October 2020. Brooke Jackson was hired in September 2020 by I think Ventavia Research Group. As a regional director. She is some sort of clinical trial auditor, so she audits clinical trials. and she worked. She was hired to audit these trials that they were doing, that Pfizer was doing outside of the structure. And what she saw was horrifying, because everything was sloppy and done wrong, and all sorts of rules violated. And when she brought it up, nobody was interested. And then she complained to the FDA directly, and then the same afternoon she was fired by this Ventavia research group.
Yeah.
So yeah, just to put that into context, how
right. And she as her case has been dismissed numerous times. I think they're technically still trying to move this case forward, but the Department of Justice under all administrations, Trump or Biden, consistently fights Brooke Jackson and tries to suppress her information and suppress her case. So it's been very clear that whole of government came defending Pfizer for fraud in clinical trials. And Pfizer committed the same fraud that everybody else committed. As I said, the only difference is that they wanted to have access to their own data. And that's how they carved out, probably using their corporate weight. They carved themselves out of the structure.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, except for this little footnote, there's absolutely no indication that anything is different from Pfizer.
It's different.
It's just so. And Brooke Jackson, she one of the things she complained about was that adverse events weren't followed up.
Yeah, that was consistent pattern. Nobody was interested in adverse events, and we know from numerous people who got injured in clinical trials, including children, Mary DeGaray, right? So when they tried to report her adverse events, she was immediately, kicked out of the system, suppressed. Nobody wants to hear from her. She's paralyzed and in a wheelchair with a feeding tube, and they call it functional abdominal pain. This is how this adverse event that the child, previously healthy child, now paralyzed for life, has to be fed through the feeding tube, is reported in adverse event controlled by the NIH and harmonized by NIH as a functional stomach pain.
Yeah, that's right. It's horrible. Okay, so so she talks about how great they're going to follow up with adverse events. All not true, all lies. For severe adverse events, she says, there's a more thorough review that's specifically conducted by this famous DSMB board, this independent safety board. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Oh, and you mentioned how expensive all this was. So everybody was taking a cut, etc. She says here further down, she talks about safeguarding volunteers. So first, safeguarding volunteers, she says, we are developing vaccines in a public health emergency. We recognize the urgency of it. We, as overall in Operation Warp Speed, are willing to take financial risks. So we're willing to dish out lots of money, no problem. Particularly with respect to manufacturing and investing in manufacturing earlier than one might otherwise. But the scientific integrity of the trials and the volunteer safety are not compromised.
Well, we know from Brooke Jackson's case that they were actually very, very compromised. We know from many other examples they were very compromised. And this whole investment in manufacturing is we can discuss. There are other presentations that talked about manufacturing, but it's actually a crime because they manufactured the first batches that were released onto the public in December were manufactured starting in July of 2020. So before the phase 3 trials even enrolled. Enrollment in phase 3 trials was completed in September. So they have pre-manufactured about 30 million doses already. It was already sitting in the warehouse. By the time even the first set of data was reviewed by FDA on December 10th, all those vials were sitting already ready to go. And so none of those doses were not dependent on any data, not animal, not human, no data of any kind. They were just pre-manufactured and then shipped, disregarding anything. And so that's according to current Food and Drugs and Cosmetics Act and Public Health Services Act that governs biologics and biologic drugs. That's a crime, a major crime. But you see, when the government declares an emergency, this major crime becomes an accomplishment, achievement, something for which we get awards from President Trump and Biden and everyone. This is how this crime cartel operates. They make totally illegal stuff legal when they say so, and then they profit massively of total knowledge, coordination, pre-planning, funding their own activities, putting all their secret committee Politburo members on this DSMB board, and monitoring everything themselves.
And let's have a look at the key priorities and future directions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there's what I just read. Scientific integrity and volunteer safety are not compromised, and she underlined not. It's not only very large font and bold, but not, it's underlined. Just in case you were napping off, but
Just
have to catch
again,
that word.
Trust me, bro. I say so.
Yeah. So this is interesting here. Safety pauses and holds. And she says, I wanted to specifically address some of the safety pauses and holds in the trials.
Uh-huh.
And this is very well. We are going to see what she does. She builds the case. You can trust us because we have identified problems and dangers, and we are holding these trials if that happens. So she says adverse events are expected to occur in these trials in both the vaccine and placebo groups. Now that's astonishing, right? They are expected in both vaccine and placebo groups. What are they giving? What are they injecting into the placebo group people?
It's still not clear what they were injecting into placebo group, but
it was not saline.
When I reviewed the data, it didn't look like saline placebo to me. But even saline, could have, there are some of the solicited reactions, maybe not severe adverse events. I don't think you can achieve with saline, but like arm hurting or inflamed from injection site, that can happen even with saline. But as I said, when I looked at the data, it did not look like saline placebo. My personal hunch, but I guess we can't prove it. Nobody has real documentation of this. My personal hunch is that they were injecting perhaps the vehicle, maybe LNPs by themselves, maybe there was something else. And in the contracts, in the military contracts, they referred to a dilutant. So when they were buying doses, and it's supposed to be, so the doses are supposed to be manually prepared using saline as a dilutant. Somehow in the military contracts, it's called just a dilutant, and it's redacted, and it's unclear what it is. So that's how I was suspicious about that data overall. But as I said, all of it was so utterly fraudulent. I wouldn't be surprised if they just maybe, I don't know what they did. Maybe they injected them with flu vaccines. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, well, they as you know, they never use just saline in these control groups.
They never use
the last version of the vaccine, or they always use something toxic. So they did the same here. Okay, so they're monitoring both the vaccine and the placebo groups. They are monitored, she says, and graded for severity using standard procedures, and these are regularly reviewed by study clinicians and monitors and protocol safety teams to ensure proper interpretation and reporting is needed. So in other words, she continues, we are finding these events because we are specifically looking for them, and we are looking for them according to tried and true processes. So, the fact that they are finding something means how great their work is, and so you don't have to worry about it. In addition, there are multiple layers of safety oversight, including the company's own pharmacovigilance. This should say the NIH-led protocol safety review team. Then again, this DSMB board, the independent monitoring board, and the FDA. They are all in place to protect study volunteers. So she cannot, she goes on and on about this to make sure that people understand that if they take anything from this presentation, is that how safe it is. All there to protect the study volunteers. It's something we take very seriously. Yeah. And then she said, I would say that the recent regulatory hold for AstraZeneca and the clinical pause for Janssen are signs that the system is working as expected. We are finding these cases. We are working them up thoroughly and working in close partnership with the regulators over at FDA. All right. In case you were wondering, in case you didn't fall asleep and you were wondering about it. Then she talks again about enrolling those at highest risk of infection, severe disease, critical that we assess safety and efficacy in those hardest hit by the pandemic. And there she has some interesting charts here. Here you see, the COVID-19 associated hospitalizations by age, March 1st to October 10, 2020. So the largest group by far is the 85 plus.
Yeah, because...
And then she shows this table with the underlying comorbidities, and severe obesity is by far. So obesity, severe obesity, and then also chronic kidney disease, these two, and diabetes. These three really, yeah. So these were the people that they were hospitalized. And then they were, of course, many, if not most of them, didn't survive the hospitalization because of the protocols, the deadly protocols.
Yeah, and as we know, they targeted the nursing homes, they targeted disabled people, they kidnapped they kidnapped my mother-in-law and tried to murder her in the hospital as late as 2023. So yeah, these protocols were used to claim that all these people are dying from COVID when nobody was actually dying from COVID.
Yeah. So and it also means that they killed old people, and they killed expensive people, people and low economic, and they were often, severe obesity. Chances are that they don't belong to the billionaire class. So people expensive to the system that they, I guess, considered useless, because a lot of these people did not survive it.
Yeah.
As we know from What the Nurses Saw, Ken McCarthy's book, or the nurses, the travel nurses, Erin Olszewski, she wrote a book about it. Nicole Sirotek, Kimberly Overton, whom I interviewed just recently. So a lot of these people were really killed by the hospital protocols. But he is presented as, we are so worried about them, and we have to test our vaccines on these people to rescue them. Yeah. This one here is also interesting. She gives the COVID-19 cases and deaths by race, ethnicity in 2020. And whatever that means, cases per 100,000 people. So there was a positive PCR test, right?
Yeah. So how come? Yeah, this is such a clever virus. I mean, incredible. Like, look, native Hawaiians have huge rate per 100,000, 3,000 per 100,000. It's enormous, but only 52 deaths. So almost the lowest death, second lowest death, right? And look at the black population, African Americans. 1,000 less, but they have double the rate of death. So how come? What happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, they had some really high cycle rates here on their PCR tests.
Exactly. And by the way, the obesity is actually quite prevalent in the Hawaiian and native Pacific Islander population too. So what's going on there, right? It's just, so like when you look at these charts, it's, first of all, like how many cycles did they run? And second of all, how many of those people did they capture and kill in the hospitals? Maybe in the Hawaiian and Pacific hospitals, they didn't have such a great infrastructure to capture and kill them all. But in the mainland, African populations, we can go after those,
So when you see the 100 here, so 100 per 100,000 people, that's 0.1%, 0.1%. So for Asians, it was 0.042%.
Yeah.
That quite the emergency. But it is true that, so look at the deaths, 100. The blacks really stand out here. So a lot of blacks were murdered. And that is true. Also Hispanics. She has this Hispanics here at 66. Yeah, they are all way higher. And that is what, in particular, Aaron Olszewski mentions. She worked in Queens, in New York City, and she said it was a poor neighborhood. So probably a lot of obesity, a lot of diabetes. She said it was particular, not so much African Americans, but Hispanics. Lots of Hispanics from low economic, social economic backgrounds. She said almost nobody survived.
Yeah, and because they're also these groups, Native Americans, Hispanics, Latino, and African Americans are predominantly dependent on the government healthcare. So so the Native Americans they have direct government HHS healthcare, and the other groups are typically under Medicaid because of the poverty levels. And so that's the group immediately targeted by the government because, well, they're they're useless eaters. And it's very easy to go after them. And they have very little ability to fight.
Yeah. But here, of course, it's presented as, oh, look at this. This is so unjust, and we have to come and rescue them.
And that's where the discussions of health equity always come in. Oh, look at these people.
Yeah, exactly. Health equity.
We need to protect them, and we need health equity, and we need more money for our administrators to talk about health equity while we're doing all this.
George Orwell would approve, right? I mean, equity. Let's figure out whom we should kill for the greatest I don't know,
impact,
bang for the buck or something. All right, so let's see. What does she say? For those who are hardest hit by the pandemic, yes, those were the ones. Those were the ones they were killing. In addition, we know that individuals from underserved minorities are hit harder by this pandemic, both in terms of infection and in terms of severe disease and indeed death. Yes, we just looked at that. And then she goes on about our trials have parameters that are explicit on enrollment of volunteers with these individual risk factors. So individuals over age 65, comorbidities, underserved minorities. We have been working hard. Oh, yeah, now look, listen to this, what she says. We have been working hard on proactive community engagement activities. And this really has been a top priority for NIH leadership at the highest levels. Thank you for telling us this, right? They were targeting them.
Of course they were targeting. And when she says community engagement, it means we give them money. We give the tribal leadership money to bring us the tribe. That's what they're doing. So the tribal leadership then turns around and sells off their own people to the government because they got paid. That's exactly. So all of that engagement, community, equity, harmony, it just means we have a system of carrots and sticks, and involves lots and lots of money pumped into these community organizers, NGOs, community boards, and health boards, and efforts and activities and flyers, and it's just an enormous machinery designed to target those populations for the reasons that we've discussed.
And then she even but the top priority, right? That's the top priority for NIH.
Of course, it's top priority. Yes.
Yeah. And then she gives some specifics. So she's really eager to. So she says some specifics on our activities in these areas. So first, the Community Engagement Alliance Team. This is an NIH entity that's drawing on long-standing relationships that we have at our clinical trial networks at the local level. And then the COVID Prevention Network has this specific working group, which is building on its HIV trial experience. And that group is led by health equity experts. Let's see, is it on the next page? Yeah, here we go. So this Community Engagement Alliance team, they call it SEAL, CEAL. And that was, she doesn't say that during her presentation, and it's not on her slide. But you know when that was founded, the SEAL team?
No.
That was founded just the month before. It was just founded, just a couple of weeks before this presentation.
Yeah.
They founded it.
Yeah. So.
And then, so specifically, so what have these guys done? So this CoVPN, Community Engagement Working Group again, all these astroturf groups, right? All being paid. I mean,
they're all being
all
paid.
Of this is expensive.
Yeah, they're being paid to just be foot soldiers. The network of NIH among lower socioeconomic communities.
So she wants the people to hear in this meeting what they have done. So she said, so specifically, they have stood up a series of expert panels with scientists from and working with priority populations. They have also stood up community working groups. Yeah, and remember how the priority populations had got the shots first? You remember that? How, like in New York City, it was, I think you had to be a certain ethnicity. You had to be Black or Hispanic to get the shot. They have also stood up community working groups with research familiarity, and there are a number of stakeholder outreach events with national organizations, local town halls, a specific faith-based organization outreach strategy. So let's get those churches and religion and in general in there, and grassroots organizations. There's more work to be done here. There always is, and we are committed to doing it. Yay. So, and then she says, generating and maintaining trust. This is the third priority, both in the trials themselves and then the products, that they have proved successful in the trials, but no data. We don't see any data. So this is just what I just said. I should have shown this earlier. There we go. Generating, maintaining trust. Now that turns out is a problem, because look at this poll here. Stat Harris poll, the share of Americans interested in getting COVID-19 vaccine as soon as possible is dropping. And it dropped quite a bit. So if you look at this is mid-August poll 2020 and then early October poll. So just 2 weeks or so before they had their meeting. And for white Americans, it dropped from 70% to something like 58 or so, 59. But for blacks, it dropped from 65, 64% or something, all the way down to, what is it, 42, 43%? Wow, that's not good. What's happening? What's going on here? If it continues that way, then nobody is going to want this vaccine.
Right. So obviously, despite the trillions in propaganda, media censorship, all this fear mongering, all the money that they're pouring through these little community NGOs, churches, and everything else, she's nervous now because they're losing the fear factor. People are realizing the objective reality is hard to defeat. People realizing that COVID is not posing any particular excessive risk. So clearly the public is becoming not so interested in this fear mongering from the government, or at least, the interest is going in the wrong direction for her. And especially, of course, in the African American community, they're smart. They've been a target for a very long time.
Right.
The whites are really, brainwashed and deluded into loving the government. But the black population is kind of street smart and aware of history, at least to some extent. So this is clearly demonstrated here in these statistics.
Yep. So she says and she must have said that when she was showing the slide, there is a good deal of work to be done in this area.
Yes.
We know that a good portion of the US public is skeptical of these vaccines and not jumping to take them once approved, at least at present. So what are we doing about it? Right. So she says, first, maintaining safeguards for volunteers and for the study conduct. We are taking that very seriously, as discussed earlier in the presentation. We are engaging directly with stakeholders from underserved minorities that are hardest hit by the pandemic. We are communicating the roles that entities like the NIH, like the VRBPAC, like regulatory bodies play in the careful evaluation and potential authorization of vaccines. A little bit difficult with this emergency use authorization, right? And importantly, we are committing to transparency. So the companies have made some real strides in this area, posting their final protocols, sharing enrollment data on an ongoing basis, and including enrollment by race, ethnicity, and the prompt sharing of results will also be a priority for us, prompt sharing of full results. Now, she's not sharing any data here in this presentation. So she talks about how important it is to be transparent. Nothing. There's no data here.
Watch me being very transparent by not showing you any data.
Yes, right. Oh, yeah. So she wrote it all down here, how committed they are to all these things. And then, just to wrap up, if anyone is interested in participating in any of these trials, I couldn't believe it. This website, preventcovid.org, will allow you to express your interest. We'll take a quick survey about your potential risk of infection. It's not committing you to the trial, but it's a way to raise your hand and say that you might be interested in volunteering. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Right.
And that was the end of her presentation. Wow.
Yeah, exercise and Orwellianism is right here. So we know how, especially as I said in retrospect, this looks extremely sinister, extremely carefully planned. All these words that she says, all these buzzwords.
So let's just end it here, because the next presentation is it's also quite long and full of content, very important. It's about Operation Warp Speed. So let's do that the next time in part 3. But so this was our speaker from the NIH. And she gave away a lot, I think, for anyone who paid interest. But as you mentioned earlier, you said that, because so many things were unclear and all these people listening, they're doctors, a lot of them are pediatricians working in hospitals or doing some real research. They have no idea. They don't know. They don't understand anything of it.
They don't understand any of this. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and we'll continue hopefully soon.